Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here amongst you this afternoon to share my thoughts on what I think is an extremely relevant subject, which is going to transform the development as well as application of maritime force in the future. We've had three brilliant presentations. General AK's keynote, where he explained to us where we've come from. Mr. Bharadwaj, who told us, who's telling us how we can enable what General Anand said is going to be the future. So I think it's been a great stream. It's been very impressive, very interesting. Just before I start, just want to tell General AK, sir, you mentioned Haifa Day. My uncle commanded the 61st for 5 years. So I've been regularly visiting the Haifa Day celebrations. But I must also mention that in 2018, I went to Haifa for some work. And this hotel I was staying in, the table mats in the hotel had an outline of the cavalry charge. So I asked the general manager, I said, where do you get these mats from? Do you know what it depicts, what it represents? And he wasn't too sure. Anyway, a couple of hours later, I met somebody. And he said, yes, we know it's the Indian cavalry charge. So in Haifa, they knew about the Indian cavalry charge. But unfortunately, and which is the question you asked everybody here, the Teen Murti Chowk in Delhi came to be known as Haifa Chowk only after the Prime Minister of Israel came and told people that this was the Haifa being commemorated. Otherwise, it was known as the Teen Murti Chowk. And even when we grew up as kids, I knew it because of the 61st connection, but nobody knew what those three Jodhpur, Mysore and Hyderabad lancers represented. So I think that's a great lesson in history which we have to take. And that, I think, also brings to fore how important it is to know our past to understand how we are to go into the future. So that was very, very great introduction, but my talk will be far more mundane. I don't claim any inspirational knowledge. So I will talk about application of maritime force in the future. In the last 2 decades, we have seen a distinct shift in the global security calculus from the continental land borders to the maritime domain. As the world turns its attention to the oceans for its future sustenance and its development, the oceans are going to become the scene of intense competition and contestation. Countries are going to use their military and non-military maritime power to shape the future global geopolitical and geoeconomic contours and expand their maritime frontiers to gain access to the vast untapped resources that lie beneath the waves. This will lead to a transformation in the structure of maritime forces. Technology will become the game changer, and that will shape the outcomes in the future maritime battle space. The subject I have been given today is to discuss the maritime challenges and the development of technology for blue water navies. So my talk is not going to be India specific, but India as a major maritime power, much of it will be applicable to India as a emerging major maritime power. Let me begin first by defining a blue water navy, since it specifies development of technology for blue water navies. What is a blue water navy? Naval strategists over the years have based their definition of blue water navies based on the capabilities of the navies at a particular period in time, depending on who talked about it when. But essentially, a common definition would suggest that it is a maritime force capable of operating globally across the deep waters of the open oceans at any time for any sustained duration of time. For the benefit of those in this audience who may not be familiar with this term, besides blue water navies, we also have green water and brown water navies. Green water navies are capable of being deployed considerably far from their shores, but lack the capacity and the capability to operate and sustain a long-term presence in distant waters. Brown water navies basically are those which remain restricted to distances up to 100 to 200 miles from their shore, which is small countries, small island developing states, etc. Going by these definitions, perhaps the only blue water navy in the world is the US Navy. With its 11 super aircraft carriers and a formidable surface, air and underwater capability, it can project power at any time, anywhere in the world for sustained periods of time in defense of its national interest. A blue water navy, also I must add, is not only about afloat platforms, but also the supporting shore infrastructure. The US, for instance, has 700 bases around the world. China has 2 and India has none. Even the Chinese Navy which is now the largest navy in the world by numbers, cannot claim to be a full-fledged blue water navy today. Similarly, the Indian, Russian, French, and British navies, which have a balanced, aircraft carrier-centric, ocean-going, multi-dimensional navy with full spectrum capability, can also be classified only as limited blue water navies. India, with its impressive maritime credentials, its dependence on the sea for its economic and energy security, and its pivotal location in the Indian Ocean, is essentially a maritime nation and also the leading maritime power in the Indian Ocean, where its predominance has never ever been seriously challenged. However, this could come under threat sooner than we expect. With China's aspiration of global maritime domination in pursuit of its declared aspiration of becoming the global superpower by 2049, we have to be ready for that. In the next few minutes, I will attempt to provide an overview of the contemporary technologies that will affect and influence future maritime security, which is basically the topic I have to speak on. The changing nature of the maritime threat requires modern navies to be structured and armed to address a very wide range of traditional and non-traditional threats, in addition to their war-fighting role, which is the very raison d'etre of navies the world over. The rapid advance in surveillance technologies has rendered the surface of the sea transparent, while the depths, that is below the waves, still remain opaque to quite an extent. This has led to many critics offering two main arguments to suggest that large blue water navies with large surface forces comprising platforms like aircraft carriers have become increasingly vulnerable to detection and are therefore now a relic of World War II naval warfare. Firstly, there is no denying that aircraft carriers are vulnerable to detection and offer a large target for the enemy. However, that is also true for a frontline airbase near the border or an armored formation spread over a 100-kilometer line along the border. Secondly, aircraft carriers operate with a multi-dimensional protective screen around them, so they are very well protected. This argument about them being redundant also gains currency when one places their present role in a World War II template. But if one were to adapt these platforms to the contemporary operational scenario in a networked maritime theater of operations, they remain as relevant as ever and form the core element of a blue water navy. An aircraft carrier does not sail alone. It is accompanied by a battle group of ships, aircraft, and nuclear attack submarines, which between them encompass a navy's full spectrum capability. Carrier battle groups of large navies are more powerful than many small navies. Similarly, the air wing of a carrier battle group with its integral fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters is itself like a floating airbase. Imagine a networked force comprising a powerful naval element and a floating airbase that can travel up to 800 kilometers in a day and deliver deadly kinetic effect from the air, on the surface, and from beneath the waves wherever required in the world. That is the power of a carrier battle group. Navies are by nature and composition meant to be offensive. And like I said, a powerful strike carrier battle group can effectively take the battle to the enemy. Add to that the wide swath of ocean such a force can cover with its networked sensor and weapon capability for detecting, tracking, and attacking the enemy, or even carrying out attacks on land targets from standoff ranges at sea, thus opening a front from the sea to shape the land battle. Therefore, it would be a folly to suggest that surface forces have become redundant. In fact, the investment being made by large navies in blue water platforms, including aircraft carriers, would suggest just the opposite. This is also true for the Indian Navy. Of the 60-odd platforms currently under contract or in build, ships being built, less than 10 are submarines. Modern aircraft carriers are now being equipped with complex electromagnetic aircraft landing systems, known as EMALS. The first one was fitted on the latest US aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford, and the second ever system is undergoing trials on China's third aircraft carrier called Fujian. The improvements in aviation technology and aircraft design has ensured that carrier-borne aircraft are sleeker, lighter, and more lethal than their predecessors. This enables modern aircraft carriers to embark a variety of aircraft designed for different roles. Modern surface ships are also getting larger and more lethal. The Type 055 destroyers in the PLA Navy, the Chinese Navy, the Aegis class destroyers of the US Navy, our own Indian Project 15B destroyers, which are indigenously built, all of these pack a very formidable punch. Ships and submarines are now equipped with multi-static sensors, real-time data links, sophisticated EW systems, space-based surveillance and communication, lethal weapons with precision targeting, land attack capability from the depths of the oceans at targets well beyond the horizon, sophisticated stealth features, and complex propulsion systems. However, the real game changer in future maritime operations will be the application of emerging disruptive technologies. Sensors, combat management systems, and even platform management systems are now being designed with AI features. Quantum communications and navigation are the future for submarines. However, it is probably unmanned and autonomous technologies in the air, on the surface, and below the waves that are amongst the most visible and effective in reshaping the global maritime seascape. Since this conference is mainly about unmanned autonomous airborne platforms in the maritime domain, I will focus the rest of the talk on that. In this century, the world's oceans will be the focus of global geopolitical and geoeconomic interaction. 90% of global trade and 80% of global energy travels over the sea. This trade dependency will intersect with geopolitical contestation, as we are seeing already. Ensuring the security and effective management of this domain is going to present significant challenges. However, the advent and rapid evolution of UAVs have ushered in a transformative era for maritime operations, offering unprecedented capabilities against both traditional and non-traditional challenges. These have now become an integral component of naval power projection and maritime security architectures amongst navies all across the world. For naval forces, UAVs represent a paradigm shift in how maritime operations are conducted. They can perform a variety of tasks, and their multi-modular construction also provides optimal and flexible operational capability. Amongst their many tasks, they are deployed for the most significant of which I will just briefly talk about. Firstly, perhaps the most important is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, also known as ISR. Unlike manned aircraft, which have inherent limitations of endurance and range, UAVs can loiter over expansive ocean areas, keeping an unblinking eye that significantly enhances situational awareness at sea. This persistent surveillance capability provides the naval commander a comprehensive means of detecting and tracking enemy surface ships and identifying potential threats much before a shipborne sensor can. Radar-equipped UAVs can provide an early warning and timely alert of approaching enemy ships or aircraft, much before a shipborne radar would. This would give the commander adequate time to decide his response. UAVs are also very effective in providing accurate target acquisition, target designation, and coordinates of over-the-horizon targets for gunfire support, missiles, and other strike weapons. This is an extremely important capability for blue water platforms, as it enables them to project power further and with greater precision. Following a strike, UAVs can also conduct very effective battle damage assessment, providing real-time imagery and information on the effectiveness of the engagement, allowing for timely adjustments and follow-up actions by the commander. The second major role UAVs can perform is of electronic warfare. Besides supporting kinetic missions, UAVs equipped with specialized EW payloads can be deployed for EW operations. They can conduct electronic surveillance, jam enemy communications, and support electronic attack missions. Their expendability and relatively low cost make them particularly well suited for high-risk EW tasks in contested electromagnetic environments. This also reduces the danger to manned assets in these very high-risk operations. UAVs can also be very valuable assets as anti-submarine warfare platforms. UAVs equipped with sonar buoys or other advanced ASW sensors, including perhaps a dunking sonar, can loiter for extended duration in a submarine probability area and direct other anti-submarine warfare assets, including ships and helicopters, to the submarine's position. Their ability to monitor a vast swath of ocean for extended periods precludes the limitations of limited endurance of manned ASW platforms. Similarly, AUVs equipped with specialized sensors could be effectively used for mine sweeping and mine neutralization, thus keeping the man out of the loop in this potentially hazardous task. However, a word of caution, these ASW applications, anti-submarine warfare and undersea applications for UAVs are still at a developmental stage, and still we have to go a long way before they mature as technologies. But when they do, they will be a great asset in an ASW environment. UAVs also are great force multipliers for maritime security. Navies have 4 traditional roles. These are the military role, the constabulary role. Constabulary means the policing role, the Coast Guard role, the diplomatic role, and the benign role. Benign is humanitarian assistance, disaster relief in natural calamities, etc. While navies are structured for the military role of traditional war fighting, the changing nature of the maritime threat has introduced a very wide spectrum of non-traditional security challenges, which finds navies being increasingly deployed in a constabulary role. Piracy, maritime terrorism, gun running, human migration, illicit trade, maritime crime, illegal fishing. There are a whole lot of them for which navies are now being deployed. So we have discussed the utility of UAVs primarily in a military role. But beyond these, UAVs have become indispensable tools for tackling the non-traditional threats ranging from protecting national security interests, the marine environment, and saving human lives. In search and rescue operations, which is a very major benign operation of any Navy, search and rescue at sea, UAVs have proven to be life-saving assets. Equipped with advanced sensors, including infrared cameras for night vision, UAVs can rapidly survey large areas, even in adverse weather conditions or remote locations, to locate vessels and individuals in distress. Their ability to provide a rapid initial assessment of the situation and guide manned rescue assets to the precise location can significantly enhance the speed and effectiveness of an SAR effort. Some UAVs like the Hermes 900 are even capable of deploying life rafts or communication devices to aid those who are in need of rescue. UAVs also provide persistent surveillance over territorial waters, exclusive economic zones, and international waters, monitoring for illegal activities, which I mentioned, such as smuggling, piracy, and unauthorized fishing. The constant presence of UAVs capable of identifying and tracking suspicious vessels acts as a significant deterrent to such illegal activities. The data and imagery collected by these UAVs can be crucial in building cases against maritime criminals and ensuring the enforcement of maritime laws. Surveillance of the coastline and approaches to harbors can effectively prevent smuggling, illicit traffic, and maritime crime. The maritime environment is facing an existential threat from the effects of climate change. UAVs are being deployed now for environmental monitoring, pollution control, and other threats to the very delicate marine biosphere. A few words about India. India has set a target of transforming itself into the global drone hub by 2030. To achieve this, all stakeholders, including the government, public and private industry, including MSMEs, and especially startups, research organizations, and academia, must come together to develop an enabling policy framework which lends itself to speedy implementation. General AK mentioned the defense procurement procedure or the defense acquisition procedure, 630-page document. Very sound in policy, but very poor in implementation. And that's what we have to guard against. The development of drone technology is not restricted to the defense sector. Drones are becoming increasingly ubiquitous in our daily lives. Hence, the defense sector, though more specialized in its requirement, should not be seen in isolation and should also benefit from the civil-military fusion in these technologies. Drones are part of a larger disruptive technology revolution, which includes artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, predictive analysis, the electromagnetic spectrum, undersea technologies, and even space, cyber, and quantum. All of these will have to be integrated into drone development to realize its full potential. Drones are not a recent phenomenon. Unmanned aerial vehicles have been around for more than 3 decades and have been successfully used for surveillance, reconnaissance, and loitering. The Indian Navy itself has had a full-fledged UAV squadron for more than 25 years. And you are probably aware that India is buying 31 MQ-9B Guardian drones, AUVs from the US. Of these, 16 are for the Navy, and the remaining 15 are going to be divided between the Army and the Air Force. So that highlights how important UAVs are in the maritime domain. So I think I have already exceeded my time. So I will close now with the following suggestions to those of you present here from academia, industry, and also the budding entrepreneurs in this space. Firstly, the Indian Navy has released an unmanned roadmap a couple of years ago. I wonder how many of you are actually aware of it, because even its unclassified version had a very restricted distribution list. But please try and get hold of this document through the Naval Headquarters Directorate of Staff Requirements. It talks to the roadmap and the air, surface, and underwater requirements for unmanned platforms over the next 15 years for the Indian Navy. Secondly, please do not generalize drones as a single category. Look for a niche in which to focus the research and development of your capability. Today, drone manufacturers are proliferating in the market. Cheap drones can be bought on Amazon, but we are talking military applications of drone technology. As drones get more specialized, the numbers of those producing them will reduce drastically, and only those meeting the specific requirements will survive. So we've got to be careful about that. Thirdly, do not look only at the platform. Focus on the payload. That is where the cutting edge of technology lies. Fourthly, one of the main challenges in this era of unmanned platforms supported by artificial intelligence is the question of their ethical use in war and peace. There is no regulatory mechanism in place at present, but sooner rather than later this issue will have to be addressed and could have a profound effect on the application of unmanned technologies in the future. Fifthly and finally, one should not get carried away by media coverage of drone attacks. Unmanned capabilities in the military sector are nowhere near replacing manned platforms in the near future. But these are going to be very, very effective as force multipliers, supporting the manned platforms in delivering the desired results. Well, thank you very much for your patience, and I'll be happy to take on any questions. Thank you.